Great, now it works. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining our session. Today we're collaborating with GDSC Sokendai. This is one of our events for the International Women's Day. Today we have Esther as our speaker. Thank you very much for joining our session. And without further ado, let's get started. So firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rose. I'm one of the facilitators today. I'm the lead of GDSC Waseda, and Aya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Aya and I'm a lead of GDSC Sokendai.
Okay, great. Sorry. Oh, the slide is...
Rosie, I think in the bottom there is an arrow. You could...
Yeah, usually. Okay, great, now it works. I'm sorry. Okay, so without... Before starting, I just want to explain the housekeeping. So this session will last for 1 hour, and also session is being recorded. So feel free to turn on or turn off your cameras. Slides will be shared later through the mailing list. And during the session, please mute your microphones. Okay, next I'd like to explain the agenda. So firstly, I'd like to do a quick introduction and also introduction about our speaker. Next, Aya will be explaining about our theme for the International Women's Day 2022. After that, Esther, our guest speaker, will give her talk, followed by a Q&A session, and lastly, we're going to be closing the session. Okay, so firstly, I'd like to explain about our community. So for some of you, it may be your first time joining a GDSC event. Some of you may have joined GDSC events before. So basically, Google Developers Student Clubs are university-based community groups supported by Google developers. And our intention is to empower student developers and strengthen their leadership skills through technical and non-technical events. So today, this event is a joint event with GDSC Waseda and GDSC Sokendai. And by scanning the QR codes that are shown here, you will be able to join our mailing list. And it's a simple step. You can just click the join button, fill in your information, and every time we host an event, you will be notified. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here and give you some time to scan the QR codes, maybe 10 seconds or so. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can unmute yourselves or type your questions in the chat box. Okay, so hopefully everyone has scanned the QR codes, so I'll be moving on. Okay, so next I'd like to explain about our speaker, introduce our speaker. So today we have invited Esther as our guest speaker. She is a software engineer with 15 years of experience. She currently works for Google New York City as a senior software engineer. She holds a bachelor in computer science and mathematics from New York University and a master's in computer science from Columbia University. So she'll be introducing about herself later in her slides, but this is a brief introduction from my side.
Thank you, Rose. I'm really excited for our following speaker session. And before we go to it, let's first take a moment and understand what is International Women's Day and why it is important to celebrate this moment. International Women's Day occurs on March 8th every year, and it is the marking point for us to acknowledge the incredible contributions of women around the world, and it calls for action for accelerating gender parity. And International Women's Day, the campaign that organized by women techie makers and other communities such as Google Developer Student Clubs in Japan. And this campaign occurs all around the world during the months of March and April. During this campaign, we host different kinds of events to celebrate this moment. And in fact, last year, Courage to Create International Women's Day campaign reached more than 1,000 100,000 attendees worldwide. So we are excited to see you all today being a part of this worldwide community. Next slide, please. And I want just to describe different kinds of events that International Women's Day campaign hosts, such as the workshops that help you to boost your confidence, acknowledge your experiences, your strengths, your skills, and celebrate them. By celebrating means sharing with the community, inspiring other women, inspiring men, everyone. Such campaigns include I Am Remarkable workshop and reframing your narrative. And you can find I Am Remarkable workshops all over the world. Just go to the Google Developer Student Clubs and check the nearest workshop nearby. And we also host some technical workshops, including TensorFlow, Android Jetpack Compose, or other workshops that cover Android development, Google Cloud, web development, and so on. And I want to emphasize on the theme for this year's International Women's Day. Maybe next slide. Yeah, thank you. So the theme for International Women's Day is progress, not perfection. This year, we celebrate all kinds of progress, big and small, and the qualities that we face when we follow our dreams. It could be fears, it could be hesitation, but it also could be the strengths that help us to overcome these fears, overcome these struggles. It also helps us to acknowledge the lessons that we learn from our struggles, the advices that we get or give others to overcome the challenges. It acknowledges the connections that we built or developed when we seek help or when we want to help others. And we are all similar but different in different ways, and our paths aren't always linear. So we celebrate progress, not perfection, because when we set up incredibly high standard goals, sometimes we are discouraged when we don't reach them. And today we want to celebrate all progress that we've made and the inner strengths that allowed us to get here. So what does progress, not perfection mean for you? We will be honored to hear your stories, your experience, and how do you understand this. You can unmute yourself, or you can just write in the chat the ideas that you get from hearing this theme for today's International Women's Day celebration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Aya, for this theme. If you could type in the chat, what do you think about this theme? Would very much appreciate it. So next, we'd like to move on to Esther's talk. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. And yeah, Esther, if you could share your screen. I'd really much appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, all right, great. So thank you everyone for coming today, whoever's listening. I'm very excited to be speaking to you. It was an honor to be chosen from all the volunteers to speak to you today. And I really like the theme that you have of progress, not perfection, because I think it's a lot of the advice that has helped me in my career, and I think can help others, really is about progress, not perfection. I think, you know, a lot of times people are, you know, get nervous about things or wait until they're perfect at something before, you know, taking on new roles or new responsibilities. And it's very important to push yourself to do things before you're perfectly comfortable with things. And I think I really, you know, I think the theme really speaks to me as something that, you know, I think I need to hear more often as well. And it, you know, has helped me. So with that, let's see. A little bit about me. You gave a great introduction, Rose. Thank you so much. I'm right now a senior software engineer at Google. I've previously worked at Bloomberg, which is a financial services company, and at Amazon AWS on cloud. I got my BA from New York University and a master's from Columbia in computer science. And just a little bit about me. I'm excited to be speaking to a Japanese audience. I love Shotokan karate. I'm a second-degree black belt. It's registered in Japan. I'm very excited about it. I read a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of mostly anything because I really like reading, and I absolutely love travel, even though I haven't been doing much of that in the last 2 years, but maybe eventually soon. So that's about me, and an outline of what I'm going to be talking about today. First, I'm going to talk about why I love my job and why computer science in the first place. Then I'll talk a little bit about advice that I wish somebody had given to me early in my career when I just started my job. I'll move on to talking about balancing work and family, since that's something I've been doing for a long time. Why volunteering is important. I think giving back to the community is a very important aspect of building your career as well as for personal development. So kudos to Rose and Aya, who have already started by running this club, and everybody can get involved. And then finally, we're going to touch on staying current with emerging technologies, which is, in my very informal polling of coworkers, this usually comes up very, very quickly. Everybody's wondering how to do this in the most efficient way. So I'll give you some ideas that I've pulled from, you know, from all my friends and colleagues. And finally, we'll open up for some questions. And I hope some of you will unmute and share a little bit about what you learned. If you have any questions in the middle, feel free to ask. And with that, I'll get started. So why I love my job. So I really like working as a software engineer. I can't say it's something I've always wanted to do. In fact, when I was a kid, it was something I was absolutely sure I would never do, because in my family, my mother was a software engineer. My father was working in science, but did programming on the side. And my older brother was into it. And basically, this is all anybody talked about at home. And I was convinced that I will be different and I will never do this. And this is so terrible. Everyone's, you know, I was like bombarded with it my whole life. But then in the end, every time I tried it, I actually enjoyed it. And I got into it right before college as just something to do for fun. And then I absolutely loved my first class and decided that actually, you know, if I'm willing to put aside the fact that this is not a unique and innovative way to do my career in my family, I actually really enjoy it. So that's kind of when I got started. And I've been very happy with my career choice, because this is a career where you're constantly learning new things. And I like to keep very busy. So I like learning new things all the time. You're never going to get bored because there's always something new to learn and something new to try. I really enjoy the fact that with software, you can build things, even though I'm not very good with my hands. So I never liked building physical things, but building software lets me build things without being very good at building physical things in the world. And software makes a huge impact. You know, you can even say more than physical things in the world. So I really enjoy that I can create without being very hands-on. And I love the fact that it's a very flexible job. I like the flexibility of, you know, especially now, you know, everyone's working from home. I love working from home. I love coming into the office to meet people. I like the ability to, you know, work from home or work in the office or go on a trip and work from there. So that's been really nice. In general, you know, the industry is pretty good about, you know, if you get your work done, no one really cares how you do it. So that would have been really nice. And I also like the fact, a different way of looking at the flexibility in that it's an applied science. So you could apply it to almost anything. So if you're interested in education, you can work in tech for education. If you're interested in nonprofit, you can work in nonprofit. If you're interested in medical field, you can work with medicine. So whatever field of inquiry interests you, you can have a tech job with that kind of company or in that part of the field. And then you get to learn a lot about the company where you're working. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you use your software engineering skills for and how you make an impact in the world. And I think that's pretty unique among fields where you don't always get a lot of options in other fields. So this is why I think going into computer science is a really great idea. Next, I'll talk about a little bit what I wish I knew when I started my first job. So when I started my first job, I did a very typical, you know, I had my 4-year degree in computer science. I got a couple of internships or I did some small things. And then I started my first job. And I came in and when you get your first job, you kind of treat it like you would a school assignment because you've been doing school your entire life. And in school, the way you do work is somebody gives you a homework assignment that you should more or less know how to do. You figure out how to do it and you do, you know, the best job you can. You get an A and everything is good. And then at the end of the year, you get promoted to the next grade. So a lot of people think that work works the same way. And when you just start out, it kind of works the same way. You come into work and your manager hands you a project and there's enough information there to get it done. Sometimes you have to ask some questions, but in general, you get the job done. And then you finished your assignment and then you say, okay, I'm done. Can I have my next assignment? And that kind of works, but that's not really, you're supposed to move on from there. And it takes a while, I think, for people to figure out that just waiting for someone to tell you what to do next, it's probably enough to do okay, but that's not enough to do really well. And I think what changed this perspective for me personally a lot was the book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, where she talks about, you know, people waiting, you know, for careers to just move by themselves, but actually you need to own your own career and you need to think strategically about what you want to do and how you're going to get there and try to always be doing better to grow, you know, yourself, your work and everything you're doing. And I think most people coming out of school, it takes them a while to come to that. So, which is why I'm trying to tell everyone here that this is something that you should do. So my first bullet point here is it's not enough to be just assigned work and do a good job. That's the minimum of what you need to do. But really what you want to do is you want to understand the business of what of the industry you're in enough that you can understand why you're being asked to do the thing that you're doing. So, you know, when I was in finance, my manager recommended I take a CFA exam to learn all about all the different financial instruments, which was a very good idea because it's very difficult to write software about things that you don't understand. So it's important to understand the business of that your industry is in, and it's important to understand how your job fits into the business, because when you do understand where it comes into the business, you could actually offer an opinion of whether you think the project you're being given is a good idea or not. In fact, some of the best projects I've done, maybe not the best, but some very important projects were doing enough legwork to figure out that actually the thing that I was asked to do was the wrong thing to do and we shouldn't do it, and here is why. And then you save 6 months of work and you can do something more impactful. That's actually a very important thing to be able to do. So that's kind of step one. The next thing is to be creative with ways you can bring more to the table than just doing a good job. So you need to be able to think, come up with ideas of what you think should happen next. You should be able to network across teams, because a lot of times you'll be asked to do something, but it's possible that the team across the hall is already doing something very similar. And if you knew about it, you don't have to write the whole thing from scratch. You can work together and do it faster than if you would write everything yourself. So knowing what the teams around you are doing is usually very helpful. And sometimes the only way to do that is just to be able to walk around and talk to people. and find out what they're working on. And also volunteering for things. In general, when someone in the room says, who wants to do this thing, sometimes it might be worth your while to volunteer and do this extra thing. And a lot of times the thing that you're doing is something, this was an interesting thing, like you want to, when somebody asks you to volunteer to do something, sometimes it's busy work, but what's busy work for one person is a learning opportunity for another person. For example, I volunteered to manage a project for the very first time. For somebody that has a lot of experience managing projects, managing a small project is busy work. It's not your core responsibility as a developer, but it's something you're good at and needs to get done. But if you've never managed a project before, for you, this is a growth area. So volunteering to be the person to manage a project, even though it's not a coding task necessarily, is actually a great growth area to grow your own soft skills. And also, so you're going to be doing someone else a favor by taking something they don't want to do off their plate, and on the other hand, learning how to do something that you didn't know how to do. So I think sometimes people volunteer for too many things. It's important to be strategic and not always say yes, because then you take on too many things. But volunteering for things that are outside of your core role, that are not just exactly what you know how to do, which is usually for people who are software engineers coding, is actually a great way to grow your soft skills, help out your manager, do network and know what people are doing. And in general, it's a great thing to do. So those are the things that I definitely wish I had started doing earlier and have served me very well once I learned that these are things that I should be doing. Two more things that I wish I knew. The first is that careers are long. You know, you're in college for like 4 years. That's not that long. You're going to be working at your job for probably 40 years. That's a very long time. So it's important to have a long-term perspective on things. I think people are afraid to take risks because they're afraid that they're going to fail. And failing is fine. And it's just a setback and it's a learning experience. And the first time I failed miserably at a project, I was so embarrassed. I came in really late, and I came in really late because I misunderstood a requirement that, you know, the business person forgot to tell me about. He was like, of course I meant you should also do this. And I said, you didn't say that. But he meant it. For him, this was obvious. So because I misunderstood the requirement, I came in a month late on this project I was leading, and I was devastated. I was so upset. And I remember, you know, someone telling me, you know, like, it's fine. It's a learning experience. What did you learn from this? And I said, well, I learned that I should get in writing exactly what I think the project should be and get the business person to sign off on it. They said, okay, that's good. Now you've learned how to lead a project. You're late. You know, it's okay that it was late and people were upset. And the other thing is that there's a recency bias when people think about you. They remember the last thing that you did. So the person told me, so just do a good job the next time. No one's going to remember that you failed. And it was true. Within a year, nobody remembered that I failed. I did the next project very well, and it was okay. It wasn't as devastating as I thought it was going to be. So I think that also goes very much with our theme. It's called progress, not perfection. You can't expect perfection from yourself in your career the way you might expect to get A's in school. It's just easier to get A's in school than to knock it out of the park in every single project that you take on at work. So learning to be kind to yourself and to learn from your mistakes rather than getting very upset is very important. The other thing that careers are long is that you will meet all your coworkers again. In both times when I switched jobs, I landed on teams with previous coworkers because of them. And the important takeaway there is always be nice and kind to your coworkers and help them out, because they will be helping you out, because your career is long. You will meet everybody again. Everybody knows each other. So make sure that, you know, if you have any interpersonal problems, you solve them and you work through them, and you know, always leave on your best foot anywhere you are. And the final thing is amplifying your voice. I think this goes a little bit with what I said earlier, when you don't know when, again, you assume that if you do a good job, your work will speak for itself. And in general, that's true, but people are very busy in a work environment that they don't always have time to pay attention to exactly how good your job is. So usually the person who reviews your code will know what great code you wrote, for example, but your manager or your manager's manager may not have any idea what you're doing. And just doing good work isn't really enough, because you need to learn to have people learn ways that you can showcase your work and the good stuff that you've done, so that other people know what you're doing. And I think, Aya, you mentioned in I Am Remarkable workshop, I think that's actually some of the things that is talked about there, because I've taken that workshop. It's a, shameless plug. It's a great workshop. You should take it. And some reasons that you might be hesitant about letting people know about what you did is, firstly, something called Imposter Syndrome, which was revolutionary for me when I learned about it. It's, you always think that, like, oh, I'm not so great. Everyone's so much better than me. If they find out that I'm not so great, then they're going to laugh at me. I'm not really so amazing. And the secret there is that it's usually all in your head, and everybody feels the same way. Everyone is secretly afraid that they're not as good as everyone thinks they are. So you just need to learn to recognize this in yourself and not pay as much attention to it. And in terms of amplifying your voice, a great way of showcasing your work is to actively thank people that have helped you. So it may feel uncomfortable to tell people, oh, I did this and that and the other thing, but it may be more comfortable to thank your coworkers that helped you on a project in a larger format, so people can know what you worked on through the thanks. So it's a great way to, first of all, acknowledge your coworkers' contribution, and see my point above. You will meet them all again. So be kind. It helps them, and it also helps you present what you've done in a way that doesn't feel bragging or boastful, which is very difficult for a lot of people. And another thing that I realized later on is you should look for opportunities to present your work. When I first started this, I was terrified of public speaking. I never presented anything. I would get all sweaty every time I would give a talk, and I forced myself to present my work. So I would actively go to meetups and talk about what I'm doing. I would organize talks at work for other people, and then the best way to do that is present something yourself. So I would give little talks at work on the work I'm doing, and eventually you get better at it. I'm now talking to you, and I am not as absolutely terrified as I was the first time I got up on stage to talk. So you definitely get used to it. It's a wonderful skill. And it's, again, another way of, helping other people stay up to date with technology and, showing your accomplishments to other people in a way that's not very threatening. Work-life balance, the next topic. I think work-life balance also fits really well into our progress, not perfection. I remember I read somewhere that there's no such thing as work-life balance. It will never be balanced. There's only work-life trade-offs. You're going to need to make choices of how to make it work. So for me personally, I'm the mother of 4 daughters. I had 4 kids while working. I actually got my master's degree while I was working with 2 kids. It was really a very exciting time in my life, doing school and work, full-time work, and having kids at home. So I definitely know about the balance that it takes. And I think my main takeaway is that, it's doable. This is something that is possible, but you need, there are ways to make it better. I think the first is to realize progress, not perfection, that you will never be absolutely perfect at everything. You will never have the perfect home life combined with the perfect work life, because life isn't perfect and you will never really feel that you're doing everything in the best possible way. And that's okay, because you don't need to be perfect in everything that you do. So as soon as you let go of the need to do everything absolutely perfectly, you will take a lot of pressure off yourself, and having everything be good and okay is perfectly fine. The other thing that I learned is you have to have support. I found there was a chapter in Lean In that I mentioned earlier that I found very funny, which was Sheryl Sandberg was saying, you should marry somebody who's going to support your career. Don't date people who aren't going to, which I found it was tongue-in-cheek, but actually very true. And it's important to have family that supports your ambitions. I think it's important to have a partner that is going to be helping you out, especially if both of you are working. You got to figure out how that's going to work. And it can't be one person does everything while the other person does nothing. I'm not a strong believer in splitting everything 50-50. I think you split everything according to people's strengths and time. So, you know, I've never sat down and gone through every single thing in my life to see if it's split 50-50, but, you know, there's a lot of negotiation of who handles what in our house. The other thing is you should find a good network of peers. It helped me very much to meet other moms at work and gripe about things. We actually, when I was at Bloomberg, a friend of mine started a working parents group where all the different working parents would support each other in, you know, balancing family life with demanding jobs. And it was really nice to have people who had ideas and kind of understood the difficulties and, you know, and would talk. So it was very nice to feel supported. The other thing was ask for what you need. You know, I think in the beginning, in my early career, I was always embarrassed to like ask for any kind of accommodation. I was like, no, I need to do everything perfectly like everybody else, until I realized that it's you know, it's fine. If, you know, at one point I asked, you know, way before COVID, I asked, can I work from home once a week? It's been really hard for me. And my manager said, yeah, that's fine. No one else on the team did, but, you know, but I did, and it was okay. You know, I think that goes together with the next point, that don't be embarrassed. I was very embarrassed about asking for any kind of accommodation. But I think you think about yourself more than other people think about you. For you, this is like earth-shattering and very embarrassing. For other people, it's like, oh, you need some help? That's okay. You know, I think it's important to realize that your manager also wants you to succeed, because when you succeed, your manager succeeds. So it's, you know, people aren't out to punish you. You know, it's very expensive to hire and train new people. So everybody would prefer to keep the people that they have and invest in the people that they have. And if there are some accommodations that you need, it's usually in everybody's best interest to accommodate you. And it's not an embarrassing thing. It's just what you need in your life right now. You know, a lot of people go, you know, careers are long. A lot of people go through a lot of things, you know, throughout their life at work, and need various accommodations. So this is just one of them. And it's not, I don't think it's anything that's, you know, that should make you feel embarrassed to ask for when you need help. Another thing that helped me in my life when I was balancing career and family was making very clear boundaries. I think I've heard this a lot from other people. Everyone comes up with their own personal boundaries. For me, for example, I'm not on my phone after hours at work. I usually, when I'm finished working, I'm finished working. Sometimes I'm not finished working and I finish up at night, but then I make clear what I'm doing. And I've always been very clear that I'm available for emergencies, but if it's not an emergency, please don't call me. You know, you can, I've been on call, I've been on pager duty, I've been paged, and it was fine. But in general, when people have random questions, it's not an emergency, and they can usually wait until tomorrow morning to figure out what the answer is. And in general, learning how to disengage from your work when you're not at work it's a good life skill to keep, you know, to keep yourself sane in the longer term. And I think more people should practice it. But whatever your boundaries are, some people do like no phone calls during dinner time, you know, whatever they are, it's really good to decide what they are in advance and then make them clear to your coworkers so they know what to expect. So I think anything goes as long as you make clear what you want. I think the other thing is that you should make clear when you want additional work. I found that sometimes people assume that, oh, you've got kids, you don't want to travel. I'm like, well, actually, I do want to travel. I have everything worked out at home. I can go on a business trip and I would like to. So I made it clear that I would like to, because sometimes people assume, you know, that you have different preferences. So if, you know, I think, you know, life goes in stages, and sometimes you're more busy and sometimes you're less busy. And when you're more focused on work and you want to do extra things and you have time to take on additional responsibilities, you should be very clear that you're ready to take on additional responsibilities, because otherwise you're leaving people guessing. And finally, I think kids are resilient. I think definitely for moms, there's a lot of guilt involved where, oh, I should be staying home with them. I should be, you know, spending all my free time with my kids. I think it helped me a lot that my mother worked as well. So I never thought that I need to spend 100% of my time with them. And I was like, well, and you know, I turned out okay. And kids are resilient and they need good role models of how to balance life and work. And you will be a wonderful, you know, if you choose to have kids, you'll be a good model of how to do that rather than feeling guilty all the time. I think a lot of the pressure comes from the guilt we put on ourselves rather than anything that's like, you know, any harm that you're actually doing. Questions? No? All right. So that was that. Why volunteering is important. Throughout my career, I've done a lot of volunteering. While I was at Bloomberg, I actually started the Bloomberg Women in Tech group. We ran a lot of events. So I would volunteer for running the events within the company. We did tech talks, we did mentoring, we did a lot of things. And we actually also made a lot of volunteering events working with younger kids. We taught coding to middle school kids. We did robotics with middle school kids. We worked with high school kids. And in general, at Bloomberg was a company that did a lot of volunteering. It encouraged all the employees to do volunteering. So we did a lot of volunteer events as a group. And I brought that with me to all the companies that I've worked at. And I've really gained a lot out of doing these kinds of events. And some of the things that you may not realize you get when you volunteer is you get to expand your network. You get to meet people in the company that you wouldn't necessarily come across in your day-to-day job. And these are really great connections because you can find out what people are working on. There could be all these interesting ways that you can work across teams with people that you wouldn't know existed, especially in a larger company where you don't all know each other. It's a great way to find out what other parts of the company are doing, what other people are doing, and they don't necessarily have to be developers. There's a lot of, you know, I've worked with lawyers and salespeople that can tell you a lot about the product from a business perspective that you wouldn't be able to get from talking to other developers. So volunteering is a great way to meet other people. It's a really great way to learn soft skills. So a lot of the work that I did while volunteering was leading events, and, you know, organizing talks and leading events teaches you how to be organized. It's very similar to project management, which you actually will have to do as a software engineer. It's very similar to people management, which you may have to do as a software engineer. And it's a great way of learning various leadership skills, but you get to do it in a safe environment because you're just doing a volunteer event. Like if it's not absolutely perfect, no one's going to yell at you. It's not like, you know, you're not messing up on a business goal. And in general, they're less demanding, and you personally feel usually less nervous about trying something new and having it not work as well if it's a volunteer event rather than it's a business event where you spend a lot of money on it. So it's a great way to practice all these different skills that you're going to need to bring to your job afterwards. And finally, you know, giving back to the community, I think is very important. I think it's something that we should all be doing. I think paying it forward to people, and, you know, I really enjoy speaking to college students for this exact reason. You know, I wish somebody told me these things, so I just want to make things easier for you. it feels good, and I just think it's the right thing to do, and it benefits everybody. So, and finally, my last topic. This topic comes up with almost any group of engineers you get together with. Will come up and ask, how do you stay up to date with new technologies? Things are changing very, very quickly. And you can't know every single thing in extreme detail because there's just not enough time in the day. If you're not using it for your day-to-day job, you have very limited time to learn the new things. So there's only so deep you can get to them. So again, back to our theme of progress, not perfection. You don't need to stay perfectly up to date with everything, and you don't need to know it perfectly. Usually you want to know it enough that you understand more or less what it is and can recognize and pattern match whether this is something that can help you in something that you want to do. So you want to be aware of what's out there and how it's used and whether it can fit into the kind of work that you're doing now. So some of the techniques that a lot of us use are listening to podcasts. I linked the one that I enjoy sometimes. So long ago when I had a commute, this is what I used to do on my commute. People listen while they're jogging, while they're driving. So podcasts are a really great way to find out what's going on. Some people like to read more than they like to listen. That's usually, I actually in general like to read. So I've tried various things. I've tried getting subscriptions to Medium and just reading 1 or 2 articles every day. I think quality varies, but in general, you'll know what people are talking about. Some people follow specific people on Twitter that they think are useful. Y Combinator News usually has some good trends that people are discussing. Another thing that I found useful is talking to colleagues, just in general over lunch. Everyone has something that they're interested in. So if you canvass enough people, you get to find out what's going on and their perspective on it. So you can kind of get like a curated list just by talking to people. Yeah, you could use other stuff instead of Medium. Thank you. I'll look that up. And another thing is most medium to large companies will have internal tech talks and trainings available. Usually people will just get up and give impromptu talks or have official training. I think there's a lot of stuff out there, and I think the trick is to find what works for you, try all of the different things and find what works as a way of staying up to date. And I think, again, the part that I found important is that you don't need a full, very specific knowledge of everything. You just need to know enough to understand how it fits in with the rest of the technology trends. So, I think sometimes as a developer, it's hard to give up on knowing everything in such detail because we like to understand exactly how it works. And I think it's good to save that for the few things you're very interested in. But it's basically impossible to know everything to that degree of detail. So it's just good to know, use some various aggregation schemes to figure out what's going on. So that's the end of my talk. I talked a little bit about, my journey and my career, and I think what's helped for me. And I'd be really curious to hear if you had any questions or anything specific that you want to talk about. Oh, I see a hand.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Esther. And I have a few questions about software engineering in general. So the first question is how do you prioritize and plan projects in Google?
Okay. So I would be hesitant to tell you how I do things at Google because Google is a very, very large company. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to stop the screen sharing because I think it's a little bit distracting at this point. And I usually use Google GVC and not Chrome. So I'm not Zoom, I mean. So I am not used to how to do this. Let me see. Did that work?
Oh, I think the screen share stopped.
Okay, it stopped?
Yep.
Yeah, right now, I think after the Q&A, the screen share stopped. Or if you click on the green button, the screen share button, and choose a web browser again, maybe it'll work.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't really have anything to share, so I was actually just trying to stop it. Good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So in terms of project planning, are you talking about like how you come up with what the next project to do is, or how you actually do like the project management and executing on the project and getting it done? Those are kind of two different things.
I think more like the second one.
Okay. So in general, Google is very hands-off in terms of like telling you how to do things. So there are very few like requirements, especially in terms of tooling. So there's no one way that everybody does it. In general, the most common way I've seen is tracking things through spreadsheets and tickets. They're not big on using external software. I've used external software at other companies. Like we've tried Microsoft Project. I tried OmniPlan. I forgot who made that product. In general, I've never really found that project planning tools are the important thing. It's the having a plan and working very like iteratively on the plan during the execution phase. So you can have the most intricate plan. I have never met a single developer that ever actually estimated anything correctly on anything ever. No estimate will ever work. So in general, you know, that's why Agile is so popular, because it's more about coming up with milestones and getting to in small deliverable parts and getting to them quickly and iteratively. And that works much better than coming up with long-term plans. And then how you choose to track it is really kind of up to personal preference.
Oh yeah, thank you for your answer.
Did you have a second question?
Oh yes. So what kind of software development methodology did you utilize until now, and which did you think that was effective?
Software development methodology? Do you mean like using Agile and Scrum versus Waterfall, or, you know, using or do you have like a specific example?
Android development, for example.
Oh, okay. So I've actually done backend, so I don't do Android development.
Oh, okay.
I do server development, so it's, you know, I think it's been very different.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that would be it for my questions. Thank you.
No problem.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna only select one of them. I really enjoyed your talk, firstly. Thank you so much. I think I related to a lot of parts, especially regarding progress, not perfection. And I think you mentioned about imposter syndrome. And I think, so I myself, I'm a computer science student, and I think we struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, especially now that everything is online and we're not able to see what everyone's doing, which track everyone's on. And if you have any tips or pieces of advice about like how you overcome imposter syndrome, and if you have anything in general, I'd be really happy to hear.
Oh, sure. I don't think there's any like one thing that always works. I think getting a outside perspective is usually very useful. So in some ways, it's a little bit easier in school. Like if you took your classes and you got an A, you know, I didn't used to think that that's enough. And then it took me about halfway through college to realize that I'm like, you know, if I'm getting an A, I think I'm doing fine. You know, like I would sit in class and be like, everyone sounds so much smarter than me. And I came into computer science, I had no background in it. And then there was a lot of people that had been coding for years. And I was like, oh, they know what they're doing and I don't know what I'm doing. Like, well, if I came out of the class with an A or an A minus, clearly I know something, right?
Right.
So a lot of times it's just using like an outside tool. I think at work, there was an very interesting tool at Google that I found where it was specifically for imposter syndrome and for reviews. I found it very useful. I think this is something, again, I think it works better at work than in school, but you would basically take a lot of jobs, they have like a career ladder where here are the levels and here's what define, when they're going to give you a performance review, they have to tell you what does, meets expectations or exceeds expectations. What does that mean? And they'll have an explanation. So what I did with my manager was we took the ladder and we broke up every aspect of it. And I gave myself a grade basically on everything, on how I'm doing. And again, these are not school grades, so they're very biased. They're and then you have to give yourself a grade and say why in every category. And then what we did was I asked my manager to do the same thing independently. And then during a meeting, we shared it with each other. And then because I had somebody grading my work and telling me what they thought I was doing, you could see that for many people, you give yourself a much harsher grade than someone else gives you. And that's when you realize that you're being too hard on yourself. I think it also works the other way. This was also a very useful tool because then I knew exactly what grade my manager wanted to give me, which took a lot of the anxiety out of performance reviews. But I think basically what I'm saying is that a good way to battle imposter syndrome is to kind of get somebody to look at your work, at who is not you, with an unbiased opinion and tell you what they think of your work. And then I think hopefully eventually you learn to believe other people, and then you can integrate that and believe it yourself. And you could, again, if you try to evaluate yourself against a rubric, come up with a rubric of what you think and evaluate yourself against it, then you'll see yourself that you're actually coming out okay.
Right. That's a really good advice. Thank you so much. I'll definitely try to incorporate that into my habits. Thank you so much. Any other questions from anyone? If you do not want to unmute yourselves, you can always type questions in the chat, or if you can unmute yourselves, just go ahead and ask questions. I think it's a great opportunity to ask any questions you have about software engineering or anything in general. Okay. Oh, we have one, Yunshi. Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, I'm the same person who asked questions before. Actually, to be honest, I'm not doing a computer science major, so I'm like a liberal arts major. So I'm not really knowledgeable towards like softwares or computer science, those kind of things. But I do have some experience in programming, and recently I have been planning with my friends to make one app that would help some people. But we were having kind of a little trouble on so we started with UI UX design, but we don't know what kind of designs are like effective and like how, like there are a lot of opinions coming around by my friends, but I don't know which design to choose for our like actual app. So are there any ways to like clearly make decisions to like for the design for like any kind of apps?
Sure. So if you're talking about UI and UX designs, the best way to make decisions would be to make mock-ups or something, and then do a real UX study on actual users. And that's what you would do in the industry. So you'd invite a few potential users. Obviously, you'd probably need to incentivize them with something like pizza, at least, something, and, gift card, something for their time, and have them use your fake app, or at least show them your designs and say, in general, don't tell them how your app works. You would just, imagine you downloaded a game, right?
Yep.
The first thing you do is the game kind of like the good game will walk you through what it is one step at a time and tell you what to do, rather than give you a giant manual explaining to you what to do, right? Yep. So when you open the game, you should intuitively be able to figure out how to do the thing that you want to do. So what you would want to do is have some mock-ups ready. Let's say 2 to 3 designs that you think are the best, and then have the people come in and have them do, use one of the apps and see where they got confused. and where, like, what was more intuitive and how far did they get. And that's what you basically do in the industry. You'd have people come in and, like, in a real UX study, they do it like in a lab, and they track exactly what they're doing. If you want to get really fancy, you can track every click, where their eyes are going, eye tracking, but you don't need to go so fancy with your design. You can basically just make some mock-ups and give it to people, and generally don't ask the same person to evaluate which one is better, because they'll probably have biases on whichever one they saw first. But you have, let's say, 10 people do each of them, and then see how far they got, or like how they rate their experience, or whatever metrics you want to use. You want to make sure you have your metrics in advance of how you're going to measure success, and then basically do A/B testing on your users until you find the best design. Does that help?
Oh yeah, that helped a lot. That gives us the next step for our like app development. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
For more questions, I want to ask, could you please share the book that you mentioned?
Yes.
Maybe the name? Also?
When this came out, it was like very controversial, which is why I read it, not because it was interesting, but people were arguing about it on the news, and I was like, ooh, arguing, I want to see why. And then I was like, oh, this is actually really useful. I think it's more or less like the manual of how to succeed in American corporate America in tech. That's kind of how I read the book, and it had some really useful advice in it. And it was well written and well researched.
Thank you.
Oh, you got one more question?
Any more
Yes,
questions? Oh,
sorry, is it okay if I ask a question?
of course, go ahead.
Okay, so hi, thank you so much for your talk today. It was really good. So I'm actually a master's student in computer engineering at UCLA, and I'm going to graduate soon. And I was wondering if you can elaborate more on your experience transitioning from graduate studies to like the industry. And so like more about like, yeah, just like how you transition, like the difference in like the settings and workflow.
So more like work transition, not like finding a job transition?
Like I guess like in graduate studies, like you would often like do some projects for your advisor and read a lot of academic papers. But I'm just wondering how like sorry, I'm trying to come up with the right question. Like how you like think it's different from the like industrial work, like like were you able to adapt well? And
yeah, I think one thing that's really important to remember, I read this statistic when reading about maternity leave, but it actually turned out to be true in every aspect of my life, that major changes in your life take 4 to 6 months to get used to. So basically, assume in advance that you will be uncomfortable for 4 to 6 months. And then you won't be surprised when it happens. And this goes for going from graduate school to work. And it went for, working pre-pandemic to complete virtual. And right now, Google's in the process of return to office. And I'm expecting 4 months of adjustment from myself and my team, at least, in this like new people trying to get back to the office environment. So I think, again, don't expect perfection. You will be getting used to things for 4 to 6 months. And I think actually what I found really hard to transition from college to work was the all-day schedule. I was used to a lot more free time. I was tired. I'm tired at the end of the day. Like sitting for 8 hours is like a very long time. I was really tired. It took a few months to get used to a new schedule where I was busy all day. I needed to get like ergonomic equipment. I never needed it in college. And then all of a sudden I'm like, my wrist hurts because I'm sitting and typing for 10 hours. I would take more breaks when I was in college. You just like, you're more focused when you're at work. So I found that to be a difficult transition. In terms of like academic versus work, I think it depends on what company you go to and what group you're in. Some groups are more researchy and some are less. So I can't speak to your exact role. But in general, when you go into industry, there's a much more, it's more focused on time to market, delivery. You know, like you're there to make money for the company. That is why you're there. You are not there to do interesting research. And if you are there to do interesting research, it is so that eventually you make money for the company. So they're much more focused on results. I think that's something that takes some getting used to. And I think, and the other thing that I think, you know, I transitioned from undergrad to working, not from graduate school. So it was a little bit different. But I think one transition that was different from like just taking classes to working was that there's no one right answer. I think it's, you kind of get it a little bit more in research, but it was like, you know, in a homework assignment, there's an assignment, you know, like you give a math problem, you get it right, you check that it's correct, and you're finished, it's correct. The real world, there's no correct answer. There's often nothing that is going to be perfect. And everything is about trade-offs of whether you do the thing that you need to do to make it work faster, or you do the absolutely correct thing. And learning to walk that line. And it's different in every role group. It's different in the project life cycle. You know, it's different in, you know, in everything. So learning that balance, it takes time, I think. So again, I think that comes back to like, it's going to take you a good 6 months to get used to it.
Thank you
Hope that was
very
useful.
much. Thank you, yes.
We have one question from the chat. Kairat is asking, looking back, what was the most difficult thing during your career journey, and what did you get or learn from this experience?
Okay, I once changed my job and absolutely hated it. It was very stressful. It was a lot of on call and very disorganized, and a lot of like management changes, and really just the culture was not a good culture fit for me at all. And I was very, very miserable for a year. I was very upset. And I tried very hard to make it work. And after a year, I realized that it's just not going to work. And first I was like, why did I do this? Like, I was perfectly happy with my job, and then I changed it just because I wanted to change to get more experience, and it was like terrible. And then I was like, yeah, you know what I did get was experience. I definitely got experience. And having a terrible job helped me clarify what I'm looking for in a good job, because I realized what I had taken for granted previously. I had taken for granted, and I'm working with really nice people. And then I went to a job where I was working with not such nice people, and I realized that actually I care very much who I work with. And then I you know, I've done this in various ways a few times. I switched from a good manager and a boring project to a bad manager and an interesting on paper project, only to realize that anything on paper that's interesting with a bad manager is not as interesting as you think it's going to be. And I was just talking to a coworker that did the exact same thing. And I was like, I would have told myself not to do it, and I did it anyway. And then I went back, and then he did it, and now he's miserable. And I'm like, yeah, you know, but I think it's one of those things that you need to clarify to yourself. And I think, you know, you learn, you know, I was in a bad job with a friend from who also quit. And then we were both reminiscing about it, and we're like, well, we gained a lot of life experience. So it's, you know, I think going back to my point that careers are long, it's okay to make a mistake. You learn.
Thank you very much. So it's 5 minutes past 12. If you have any other questions, please ask now. And otherwise, we would like to close this amazing tech talk by Esther. And we want to thank you for great insights on your career journey, your personal personal life, your academics, and just your great personality. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who asked questions, who joined us today in this celebration of International Women's Day. And I hope to see you during our next event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being here.
Sorry, one last thing. Thank you so much, Aya, for the closing. Also, Esther, thank you so much for the event. I personally enjoyed it a lot. I felt like listening to a TED Talk, and there were a lot of things I related to, so that was amazing. Lastly, for those of you who joined, if you could fill in this survey, you can just scan this with your phone. And if you could fill this in, we would very much appreciate it. How you felt about the event today, what kind of things we can improve for future events. I'd really appreciate it. So if you could please take some time and fill in this survey. I'm just gonna pause it here. You can take a screenshot or just scan it. Yeah. Okay. So that will be it for the event. Esther, I'm sorry, I think it's 11 p.m. for you. Thank you very much for arranging this with this huge time difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say good night and I realized I should say good morning. It's good night for me.
Right, the time difference is just very crazy. But thank you very much for the event today. I hope you have a great night. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Great.
you so much.
Thank you so much,
Nice meeting you all.
everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Bye-bye.